Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back, everybody, to another Workflow Wednesday. If you are new and just starting to catch this for the first time, I am Fusion Phil over here at jitcadcam, and this week we're going to go ahead and cover how to use model in our toolpaths in order to compensate our tool as well as adjust our toolpaths or make toolpath selection much easier. Now, for all of you out there, hopefully my audio doesn't suck and I remember how to change screens here. If my audio is terrible, I know it takes a few minutes. Go ahead and let me know in the chat down below so that I can get that adjusted before I get in here. And if you have any questions at any time, feel free to put those in chat. You could also join us in Discord as well. And you can see there is a support area down below if you would like more information or wanting to put in more questions for a later date to visit. So let's go ahead and switch screens and dive into this. So what is model and how does model work? Well, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pop open a very simple part, and we're going to start this at the lowest level possible, right? So as you can see, here's my part. If I was to go in a standard procedure of creating my setup, now initially you have a setup model. So the best way I like to explain this is the model that we want to finish with, right? This is our end goal of a part, right? So that end goal is going to be based off the fact that we are going to machine down to this, right? Now, when we go into our toolpaths, there's a lot of different settings to be able to use. But let's say, for example, I want to use more 3D. Now, more commonly in 3D, you're going to find this model add-on. Now, what it is under your geometry tab, you're going to notice a checkbox, right? And what that checkbox is, this is where I tell people you want to add in addition to your setup model, or you want to use a different model temporarily for actually machining, right? So I can see 4 of you guys now. The stats are coming through, guys. Hopefully my audio sounds good. Nobody says it sucks in chat. If there's any problems at any time, feel free to go ahead and let me know. But as you can see, we have model activated. And now what I see for an error before I go ahead, awesome to see it. Ty's out there from Learn It. Love to see you in here. Guys, if you don't know, Ty over at Learn It has some of the good content from the design side of Fusion, and he also has some beginner cam videos as well. But as you're going to see is, I don't know why people always, when they first start in Fusion, they think they have to do more than they do. If you've ever seen any of my videos, I always tell people just hit OK. But I commonly see people come in and redefine the same model more than once, right? So they come in and they think, oh, well, I need to define the model here at the toolpath level. However, you've already defined that at the actual upper setup level. Now, I would refer to that as, you have your world kind of coordinates, if you're familiar with that, or you have kind of a global setting for a lot of your toolpaths. That would be where our model sits at our setup. Now, on this part in particular, let's say I wanted to avoid going into this cavity with my 3D toolpath, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch back to design. And at the simplest level possible, we're just going to create a patch. And that patch is going to go right over the top. And so that you guys can see this on the side, I made the #1 rule that you should never do. Let's go ahead and undo this real quick. Is you should always turn on your design history. So let's make sure we have our capture design history on if you're going to be doing things like this. That way you can always go back and undo things. And you'll see here in a minute why that history is so important. But we're going to go ahead and create a patch. We're going to do this up on the top of our part. What you're going to notice now with the history on, gives my patch a different color as well. You see it over here on the left and see when we created that in our design tree. So for this sake, we're going to go ahead and turn this off and we're going to jump back to manufacture. Now, again, I've not changed anything in my setup, right? So what I've done is we're still manufacturing this body, right? This is our end goal. Now, if I went in and I created my roughing strategy here, for anybody that knows me, I think you guys can guess at this point where we're going. Straight to that lovely 1/2" end mill. Let's say we're using aluminum roughing, and let's just do its natural thing for actually machining out this part. Now, what you see is this toolpath is going down inside this pocket. I would like to avoid this pocket. Now, how can I do this, right? Well, by turning on model, that is going to allow me to add in addition to my setup model, right? So for this first example, what we're going to do is we're going to go grab our patch. And then I'm going to hit OK. And at this level of complexity, I know it's super complex for a lot of you. As you can see, that patch is now actually with conjunction of the original setup model. Again, that's why it's in addition to. It has now gone in and roughed everything out because it knows to avoid that area, right? So now we can take this one step further for a lot of you. Now, what would be happening if we went ahead and said, do not include the setup model, right? So I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. And what you're going to notice is it's basically going to machine everything to that actual patch that we've created, right? So some of you may be curious as to why we have it machined lower or higher or tried to do everything else. Well, the idea is because of the way we've set our heights, the lowest of selected is model bottom, which in this case is just strictly that surface that we selected over here on the left, right? So that's why we're only machining that specific area, right? So as you can see, is in addition to our setup, we want to avoid that area when machining. And as you're seeing, we could go right over that. But now we can advance this much further, right? So I'm going to shift gears. Let's go ahead and pop open another part. So where the value comes from this, and if you are making parts for somebody else and they're not using Fusion, I feel terrible for you guys because, you know, you don't get a design history with these parts. But this is another really good example, right? We're going to do some 3D surfacing, but we have all of these vent holes on our model here, right? So in this case, this is a vacuum for mold. You know, they're pulling a vacuum through these holes, they're ports, all kinds of fun stuff. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to design now. And instead of patching up all of these holes, I lucked out because yours truly actually designed this inside of Fusion, is I'm going to roll back my timeline to a specific point. Now, as you can see, I rolled back that timeline. I got rid of all of the holes on this part. This is where I can go in and I can copy and paste that body. And then I can take my timeline back to where it was, right? So what you're seeing now is I have my original part versus my modified part, right? So I like to, for all of you out there, is I usually label my stuff at this point. So you got the OG, the original gangster, right? And then we have our modified body. So again, it doesn't have to be a surface. It can be a body. It's also even better if you take this one step further and make everything components. It'll really make your life much easier in the long run. And how I would do so is I would right click, create components. And now you can see I have these set up at a component level. So when we go back to manufacture, again, I create my setup. The actual thing that I want to machine is we're actually not going to use manufacture model. Let me get this out of here. So let's go ahead and delete the manufacture model. Again, we create that setup. I'm going to go in and I'm going to define my model. In this case, we have that right here, the OG. And again, when we go to create our toolpath, we have machine sim coming through here too. And if you guys didn't know, I have videos on this. You could turn off the enclosure when you make your machine sim so that it doesn't come through. Super messy as you see it here. But let's go in and let's say we're going to do something simple like a scallop toolpath. And again, this is where I can turn on or turn off my model. Now, in this case, we're going to go ahead and leave everything basically default. We're going to crank the tolerance up on this so my computer doesn't explode. And let's do 50,000 step down. So in the great world of Fusion, again, we go back, we grab our tool. And as you guys are going to see here is we're going to start to get our toolpath built out. Now, what's going to happen is as we're coming around in a lot of these areas, we're going to start to dip in where all those little holes are, right? So you can see it very clear over here on the left. And something you can do in order to see this is one, let's go ahead and get our stock turned off. And then from that, we're going to go ahead and turn on our toolpath, but I'm going to show points, right? Now, everywhere there is a point here is an axis of change. So what you're seeing is as we're coming around in these places, very, very steep, very vertical, we may not be dipping in very far. But when we're looking at the top of our part, we're causing that kind of divot effect, right? We're dipping down inside these holes. You may or may not want that, right? It could cause surface defects if you're going for very clean square edges. I know it's rare you guys like square edges, but in the world of this, we would be pounding a stud in here or a little vent, and we would need that square edge to make sure we have a very clean surface. So what I'm going to do is we're now going to go back to that same toolpath. And we are going to actually, before I do this, I want to show you guys the data on this. So we're at 3.1 megabytes. We're going to go ahead and turn on our model, and we're going to go back and we're going to pick that modify. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave the original setup on as well. And now knowing that these two are overlapping each other, we shouldn't have any problems with that data. Now we've dropped a few points, but if we start to look at where those points came from, is everything is now flat running across our part, right? So because that actual modify here, I think I've lost my video. Did I lose my video feed here? It looks like I froze. Let me see if I can reset my camera for all of you. Give me 1 second. Never fails that we always have some type of problem when I am creating content. All right, let's see here. I think I might have lost my camera. For those of you out there, at least you can hear me this time around. You just can't see me. I'm going to give this a few more seconds here real quick to see if I can reactivate it. And again, we're going to go ahead and see if we can reboot my camera. There we go, and we're back. Hey, look at that. I don't know what is going on. Me and technical difficulties, they get along great. As most of you know, in the world of machining, there's always something. It's never easy, right? So again, what you're seeing is because we're driving this with the model in the background, it has allowed us to avoid features. Again, I just copy and pasted a part. I've created a new model, or I've modified a model, maybe even created those patches, and then added them in addition. I say this very clearly, in addition to our setup, right? So again, as I didn't go add this model back in at the setup level, again, this is going to look a little weird because we need to flop these back. But as you're seeing, the OG here for labeling purposes has come through. Again, big mistake that I see by a lot of people is they actually go in and they select both of these components. Or by default, Fusion has pulled all of this stuff in automatically. So when you go back to actually machine something, let's say, for example, I want to drill holes. If I'm trying to drill certain holes, I can actually get an error because it's running into the part. Or if I go into Machine Sim, I know we're drilling this with a ball end mill, guys, is if we actually run this inside of Simulate with Machine, and we'll give this a second here, what we're going to see is possibly a crash because of that tool colliding with that part, right? So again, this is something to keep in mind, that you don't want to add these modified bodies or these manipulated surfaces at the setup level. Again, in addition to, or not in addition to, substituting our original setup part, right? So let's look at one more example. Now this, again, gets really fun when you have Fusion 360 and when you're doing everything in both softwares. But the same rule applies is if you're somebody that's out there using the new Deburr toolpath in the extension, the same rules still apply, right? So I could go through on this part in particular and do the same thing where we roll back our timeline, I duplicate the body. Well, we could actually go through and we could do the same thing by removing chamfers, right? So for example here is if I slide back my timeline, again, we could duplicate that body, copy, paste. Not necessarily going to modify the two here, as you guys saw me with the relabeling, because I like to keep these videos under 15 minutes. But what I'm going to do is we're going to jump over to manufacture. We're going to go ahead and create our setup. Again, the part that we want to machine, we need to be very careful of this to make sure. In this case, Fusion grabbed the active model. So that's that original body that we have. And now if I wanted to go in and use Deburr, I can actually select that. Maybe we're going to do tool orientation. Let's go ahead and say Z-axis. And then we actually want to face this in what would be the Y-axis. So we want to come in horizontal. I want to do selected edges. Now, again, you could turn on that model, turn off the other model, and pick whatever edges is that you want to deburr. And in this case, there's our edges. And we can go ahead and hit OK. Of course, we got to give it a tool like always, because yours truly always forgets about that. So again, what do we have here? We don't have a ball end mill. Let's see what we have in the shop crib. So that 1/2 inch is going to be a little crazy big. And of course, our tool is coming in the wrong direction. So let's fix that. So we didn't need to be in the Y-axis. We needed to be in the X-axis. And now we should be coming in and doing our deburr toolpath. Again, if you normally would have used deburr, you would have had that chamfer in your way. So by able to use a model in the background and also being able to turn on a model with avoiding what you're trying to use, you can override those settings and very quickly go in and change how that toolpath is going to interact. So again, all I did there, guys, was I turned on model, I added this modified model I want, and I actually got a night and day different toolpath for deburring on this part. So as always, I hope this helps you out a ton. I appreciate all of you coming and checking out this content. If you guys feel free, we do have new content coming out this week. We're going to bring back Build Turn Thursday. We're also doing Free Support Friday still, as always. If you guys want to help support this channel in any way, like, subscribe, go ahead and share this content to anybody and everybody. And as always, have a great rest of your day.